Okay, so I do want to go ahead and thank you for taking the time out of your day to speak with me today, David. So you are, um, how do I put this so delicately, almost the founder of action RPG as a genre.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thanks for having me. And yeah, some people call me, grandpa, but that's but yes, the action RPGs as we know them were invented with Diablo, though it wasn't just me involved in the project. It was originally my idea.
Of course, of course. Obviously, these games require teams of people to work on. I know you worked with Max Schaefer as well as his brother. Um, so, not trying to take credit away from anyone. Um, and your current project is It Lurks Below. Um, I have to say that the game has a really kind of timeless feel to it. Um, Can you kind of explain how you went about kind of achieving that?
Well, it through a lot of iteration, but when I come up with an idea of a new game that I would like to make, which I have, like kind of a bucket full of them of ideas of things I'd like to do, but you can only make so many projects, and I can only do one every, what I'd say, every 5 years or something. I can do a project, so I want to be really committed to it over a kind of a period of time. And so the when I chose this project, it was with the intent of I wanted to kind of give that kind of action Diablo-y feel to it, but make it kind of from a side perspective. And the reason I wanted to do a side perspective is because I wanted to kind of have this almost people say Terraria, but for me it was Starbound. There was a game that on the PC called Starbound that I really enjoyed in early access, and it involved a lot of digging and crafting and stuff. And then I got really into Minecraft, I guess maybe a little bit before that, but right around the same time. And that also drew a lot of inspiration from that. But all in all, those games, both Minecraft and Starbound, kind of left me wanting. There was more to those games. Like I wanted more out of those games. I wanted the RPG elements that I know and love. Like I wanted a lot more stats and random items and things like that. And I'm just like, well, why don't I just make that game? And that was really kind of the inspiration. But for me, fundamentally, you can add all of that candy on top, but the moment to moment core feel of the game and the action and the combat needs to feel great. And that's really where everything kind of grows from. And iterating on that and working on that, I literally worked on that for like 3 months. Where it was nothing but iterating on the combat to make it feel great, and I'm really glad that I thought that it got to a really great point in the end.
Yeah, I've never heard of the game Starbound. I do love Minecraft as well as just about everybody else in the world. But I can also agree that while the expansive world is enjoyable and there's a lot of stuff to the game that makes it worth playing, it is missing almost that RPG element. It's almost like it's almost there. Um, it did get better with the enchantments and things like that, though.
Yeah, absolutely. They've it's definitely progressed over the years, that's for sure, and they've added more depth to it, including they just had that patch that with a nether
Uh huh.
that it added like a level of armor beyond diamonds. So that was like these kind of things. They're slowly getting there. They got a couple bosses and stuff like that, but it's not like a Diablo game, which is what I wanted to set out in that kind of format where there's a you know evil presence and you're fighting and you're leveling up and you're spending points and there's lots of stats and you're making builds and there's different character classes and things like that, and that's really uh, what I enjoy the most. Those are the kind of games I enjoy playing the most, and so that was kind of the mix between the crafting and digging and exploring parts of Starbound and Minecraft, and then combined with kind of the overall structure to Diablo, which is going through a series of quests and beating bosses and having a bit of a story and things like that.
And it also feels it still feels extremely roguelike at the same time, while being extremely fast-paced combat as well.
Yeah, that is all on purpose and by design. The roguelike, my roguelike roots and my roguelike love is hasn't diminished to this day. So that's I think that almost always that kind of is an element that's in all of the games that I make. And I think that just I don't know. It's sort of like being a writer and getting in. You become like a science fiction writer or a horror writer or what a romance writer or whatever. Like you kind of there's like that kind of genre that is something that really clicks with you, and that's what it is with me. For me, it's roguelikes or that kind of roguelikes and action role playing games. That combination there is right in my wheelhouse.
Okay. And then do you still keep up with Max Schaefer as well? He just
Yeah,
released
yeah,
Torchlight
yeah.
3, huh? Or
Right,
it's
yeah.
early
I
access.
Yeah, and I see them. Well, I used to see them all the time. We used to. They only live the Max and Eric. They live about 6 blocks from me. So
Oh
we
wow.
we have dinner. Before the pandemic, we had dinner every week, and we like hung out all the time. Now we're doing a bunch of like virtual meetings. I just hung out with them on Friday. I mean, online, but so yeah, we see each other all the time. We chat all the time,
Oh,
almost every day.
that's awesome. That's awesome. You could kind of take a lifelong friendship out of that. That's really cool.
Yeah,
I haven't got
yeah.
a chance to play Torchlight 3 yet. Kind of weary of EA games for the most part. I'll definitely check it out. It's just more so about deciding when I get the time to play it.
Yeah, I think that you are, not in the minority. A lot of people don't really trust or want to get into early access stuff like that. I'll just wait till it's done, and then I don't want to form my opinion too early, or I don't want it to be a bad experience, or have my character deleted, or like all these things that can happen in early access that kind of turns people off.
It's a real conflict for me because I want to be able to support people who have brought me countless hours of enjoyment through Diablo 1, Diablo 2. I played Mythos. I played the beta of Mythos. So, I mean, Hellgate London's one of my favorite games. So, I want to be able to support these people with early access when I can. It's just a weird place in gaming, I think, in general.
Yeah, I think that it's a challenge for a lot of people.
And so, how did you feel about the Diablo 4 announcement last year?
I think that Diablo 4 is obviously just like Diablo 3 is completely out of my control at this point.
Yeah, of course.
And But I think that in my opinion, Diablo 4, it looks like they're trying to kind of get back to maybe like a darker version of Diablo.
Mhm.
Now, how capable they are of that and whether or not they can actually get there and deliver on that, we'll see. But, they're at least, trying to do something, it seems like, as well as, in general, it seems a lot like kind of a game that I would design more so than Diablo 3 from what I know so far. There was, I think that my direction of the way that I see action RPGs going is more in line with kind of their what we know of the design so far. So I wish them luck. I hope it goes well. It seems like they're on a good path.
Yeah, I got chills watching the cinematic. The thing that I'm most weary about is the itemization of the game. I'm not a big fan of up down arrows when it comes to gear pieces. Think it eliminates a lot of choice. Um, and I also think that it's okay if not every person who plays the game is at the end game, right? Um,
Yeah, I
and
mean, I agree. I think that down arrows diminish the uh, complexity and experimentation that sometimes is involved in just like, well, the numbers seem like they're kind of equivalent. I'll give this thing a try. Like if you look at a down arrow or just a big number and it's slightly less than the one you have, it's like you don't even consider it. There's nothing to consider. But the gameplay, like if the items actually play differently,
Mhm.
uh, then you'll never really even explore those kind of things, which is a shame. Or at least most people won't, because they'll just see the number and they won't care about the other parts, which is it's a shame.
Yeah, it was one of my biggest gripes with Diablo 3. It was that I didn't enjoy basically that the gear grind, at least when I played, came down to, does this stat give me the stat that my damage scales off of? No, then it's not better than the other item. And then also, I didn't enjoy the fact that you can respec the character at any time. To me, I think choices have to have some sort of permanence, and if you make the wrong choice, it should carry some sort of consequence.
I agree. And that's why there was, no respec in Diablo 2.
Yeah, yeah. I've had to re-roll many of characters just based on the wrong stat allocation.
Yeah, and then you also have to, I think that helps you learn the game and you understand more of it. And people experiment and talk to each other about different builds and stuff like that. They still do that, but it's when you have to make that kind of effort to do it, it just carries a little bit more weight. In fact, that was one of the very, very first things that I talked to them about after Diablo 3 came out. I saw them right after it came out. We were at an E3 party or something like that. And I was talking to him and then I said, yeah, I think that changing your skills like that or whatever so readily doesn't give the entire thing depth. I was talking to them about that, and they disagreed. Obviously, and I can't do anything about it. They make their own choices, but I agree that I think that if you're going to have respec, at least make it rare and or difficult to get, rather than so readily available to be able to do it anytime.
Yeah, I think PoE does it well with the Orb of Regals, right? That's what you
Right,
need. And you
right,
need one of them for every point. So if you
right.
wanted to redo a whole character, you would be looking at a ton of currency just to accomplish that.
Right, right. And with their league mechanics, especially with PoE, that also encourages you to experiment and try new builds, and then they tweak all the skills and things like that every league. So there's something new and interesting to try all the time.
Yeah, that I do enjoy the leagues. I play every ladder reset of Diablo 2 to this day. At least the first day at least. Whether I keep playing past that, usually not. But I enjoy the grind to hell. It's fun
Yeah.
every time.
Yes, it can be fun.
And then I kind of wanted to stick on what you're currently working on versus talk about things that you're not necessarily involved with anymore. So, I saw that you are also you started a game production company.
Yeah, a publishing company. That's correct.
Okay.
It's called Skystone Games, and we are a publisher, just like there are many other publishers out there. I mean, we aren't the size of a Electronic Arts or or Ubisoft or anything like that. But everybody starts somewhere, and we are going to uh, be a different kind of publisher. It's not just a lot of publishers out there. They hire a development team. They give them basically some money, some capital to finish their game or do it an entire game, and then just kind of sit back and let the developer do their thing and hope that what comes out is good. And then they end up doing some marketing or whatever. But we're a little bit different. It's more of it's a closer relationship to the developers. They can think of me as like I don't know, a mentor or an executive producer, that kind of thing, where I give them feedback and help them, especially kind of inexperienced devs, with introducing them to a lot of people in the industry, understanding how different decisions and things like that have an impact on their game, and kind of giving them my career lifelong advice and wisdom that I've built up to help them be more successful. So we do the other things. We do the marketing and localization and community and PR, and as well as provide money capital to the development teams to have them create their games or finish their games. So we do all the kind of traditional things that a publisher does, but we're kind of like a developer-led publisher plus, I guess, is about the best description of it. And we started just a few months ago, and it's already we are not only did we ended up getting funded in this incredibly difficult time to get any kind of funding, but also because people love the idea so much, but also we've had a lot of interest. There's been quite a few people that have reached out and are eager to have us publish their game. More inquiries than we have actually, pipeline right now, which is great. And so we're excited about. We've signed several projects now, and we're excited about bringing those to market. And some could be out as early as this year, and but most of them I think will fall into kind of the next year or the year after for the ones that we're dealing with right now. But we still are going to be signing more, and it's off to a great start.
Okay, cool, cool, cool. And then, in terms of It Lurks Below, I've been hanging out in the Jungle Queen's Twitch. Been enjoying the community. You talked about after you get the Windows 10 version and the Game Pass version in more of a stable state that you want to start working on the next content update. Um, just from a, I know you can't necessarily leak anything. I don't want to leak anything, but what does the next step of It Lurks Below look to you like?
Well, there's all sorts of things that we can add. I mean, there's a zillion ideas. We have almost endless ideas of how, literally, I have like 5 years of work that I could add to the game. There's, from not only new areas to explore, new things to do, new types of items and uniques and weapons and rune word recipes, and like all these kind of new monsters and new bosses and new character classes. And I mean, it's so easy to add any of those kind of things that right there and alone is like enough content to last a long time. But then other things from a technical standpoint, I'd like to put it on eventually more platforms, not just Xbox, but also going onto Switch or PlayStation, things like that. Maybe even phones someday. I don't know. People have asked for that. I'm not super interested in myself right now, but people have asked for it, so maybe it makes sense in the future. And then as well as the biggest thing though is that one number one request for a long time has been everybody wants the game to be multiplayer, and so that would be kind of the penultimate thing that I'd love to add to the game is to make it multiplayer. But that is a tremendous undertaking, and honestly, it would really help, I think, to hire some more people to make it multiplayer rather than do it all by myself, because it's just so much work to make the game multiplayer. It not only makes it a lot more work, but the amount of bugs that you can create is nearly it's going to exponentially grows rather than it doubles or triples or something like that. It's just like the number of combinations of weirdo things that can happen is it makes it a lot harder. So the game that would be kind of like the dream scenario is making it multiplayer, making and then adding all of these other content areas. But we have a lot in mind. We have a lot of new things that we would love to add, and I look forward to working on it for a while.
Yeah, I've been enjoying it a lot. Haven't beaten normal yet. Working my way down into the lower levels though.
Very nice.
What does a multiplayer It Lurks Below look like for you? Because with the town system, it creates kind of a unique concept, right? Is it something where you're hosting a server where anyone can join? Can Would my character have a town if I create the game and I can join my friend's town by joining his game? How would that look like for you? Obviously, barring any technical stuff. So it's hypothetical if you can make it look the way you wanted it to look.
Yeah, that's a great question. And in fact, it's kind of a preview of it is kind of in the game right now. One of the things that you can do later in the game is you can create something called a shared town, and the shared town is a building that you create the town hall, and you talk to the mayor, and you make it a shared town. Now, any character that you create afterwards, or any of your existing characters on your account, can join that shared town, so that that becomes their town, that you can hang out in. So it would be very similar to that. Somebody would host a game, almost kind of Diablo style, Diablo 2 style, where you got the host and everybody joins that particular game. And that game is in progress, whatever state it is. You would join, the game in progress and be able to go do the things that, do whatever it is that you want to do in that world. So it would be very similar to that. You would join other people's town. You'd be able to kind of interact with some of the things. If you've got kind of like you've done research on the barn, and you have that, you can go interact with their cow and get the milk or whatever, like things like that is already in place again with this system of the shared town. If I create a brand new character and I join my shared town, like I can't actually talk to some of the NPCs yet because I haven't unlocked their buildings, or I can't, get all the crops out of a greenhouse or something like that because I haven't unlocked that recipe yet in the survival tree or whatever. So all of that stuff is already in place for a multiplayer, people being able to join somebody else's town, as well as if you have a character that is outside the town and on your account, you can buy an item at one of the vendors and transfer to the shared town. And then that becomes your town. So it's a very similar kind of premise that everybody would just join the town. You could then go back to your town afterwards, and resume kind of where you left off.
Okay. Yeah, I kind of figured that's how it would be. I just wanted to kind of get a little bit more insight. Um, was doing a lot of preparing for this interview, so I went back and watched a lot of the interviews. I watched the Riker interview. Um, the Your Diablo postmortem is probably one of the best things I've probably ever watched. Um,
Thank you.
I really enjoyed the story about the guy coming to you with the browser-based email, and
Yes.
and it later
Yeah.
turning out to be Hotmail. Um, I'm from Sacramento, so when I was when in the 90s and the early 2000s, when I still lived in Sacramento, my dad actually worked for Apple, and this is
Mm,
I played Diablo 1 originally on an Apple, and during that time, Apple was doing okay, but they didn't really take off until the release of the iPod.
right.
So my father was in a similar situation where when we moved to Arizona, he had sold his stocks for Apple,
Oh,
and then only a couple years later would have been a life changing difference in money.
yeah. Oh, man, that's tough.
Brutal, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. um, and one thing I see that I've always thought that Torchlight um, was kind of similar to Mythos in a way. But
Mhm.
Mythos was created as a way for you guys to test the network configuration for Hellgate, correct?
Originally, that was the concept, is that we were going to test out the engine and test out the networking and things like that to to make a small game. We hired Travis Baldry, who Travis had made this game called oh my god, I can't even remember the name of it now. It's this Fate.
Okay.
And I was super impressed with it. And so I reached out to him and said, "Love the game." It was a Diablo like game, really cleverly done, just by himself in like 12 months or something like that. And so I was super impressed. So we hired him to start a team and make this uh, kind of small game that we were going to use to test out networking and test out the graphics engine and things like that, and share the technology. And they would release first, and we get a lot of the bugs out, so that when our big product came out, it would be more stable or whatever. We would break our teeth on kind of this small game, indie style game, rather than the big budget game. And then it turned out that they didn't beat us to market, so it never came to fruition. Like, I mean, they were kind of in early access or beta or whatever you want to call it, but they never we never even published the game. Hellgate beat it out the door. And it was anybody's fault. We just kept making the project bigger and better because we could. And I thought that the project was better for it. Not that I thought the game was going to be awesome, but it never saw the light of day. And then Travis and Max and Eric, they after Hellgate and Flagship Studios fell apart, then they started their own studio, Runic, up in Seattle. And even though Max and Eric still lived here in San Francisco, the studio was up in Seattle where Travis was, and so they started the studio there and grew it or whatever, and then made Torchlight, kind of out of the ashes of they didn't use the code or anything like that, but they all the experiences and everything that they learned from making Mythos they used to kind of make Torchlight.
Certainly helped, I'm sure. And the thing I think about Hellgate when I think most often of it is it came out in an interesting time, I think, because one, there was no other game like it, I believe, basically until Borderlands came out the following year. Um, but also there you guys had a subscriber model in a world where World of Warcraft was the biggest thing since sliced bread. Um, and I actually know where I'm going with this sentiment, but I just, it's something that I always thought of maybe I wonder if that had something to do with the game's overall success.
Yeah, well, or lack thereof. The reason we went out of business is because it wasn't very successful, and we got a lot of backlash for that business model, a model that a lot of people wouldn't even. I mean, uh, in hindsight, we should have made it like a DLC kind of thing, but DLC really didn't exist back then, and that was kind of what we were looking for, is that kind of added revenue on top of the base product, because we wanted to continue to work on the game. And we didn't want to sell expansions. There were lots of problems with expansions, kind of a diminishing return on expansions. We wanted the game to kind of like evolve and be live and be a game as a service, ongoing forever. So free to play games weren't really around. It was kind of in their infancy at that time.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of kind of games as a service things now, a lot of free to play games that last years and years and years, and they're constantly adding new content and things like that. But that model, again, didn't exist. Uh, and about the closest thing that people did was, release these expansions. But the problem with expansions is that you sell the most expansions in the first one, and then less expansions, and then less expansions. And if you have an expansion every 6 months or something like that, you're selling less and less copies over time. And then there's all this conflict between people that have certain expansions and don't have certain expansions, and all these kind of things. So we just said, hey, we're just going to make a subscription and constantly be updating the game. But people were like, this is really weird. I don't understand this. This isn't an MMO. You can't charge us, a monthly subscription when it's not an MMO. This breaks my rule of what a game should be. And so we got a lot of flack for that. we also got a lot of, and rightfully so, got a lot of flack for the fact that it was pretty buggy at launch, and so I think that that also had a lot to do with kind of a, the unfortunate demise of Hellgate. It was the very first looter shooter, though. It is that is a second genre of game that I created. Hellgate was my idea. I pitched it the day after we left Blizzard North. Everybody came over to my house and I pitched it in my living room. It was basically the pitch was Diablo
Yes.
and Quake together. So that was everybody's
Yes.
like, yes.
Just everybody sit up on the sectional. The year is
uh,
2020.
and so the looter shooter, which is what I guess what the people call it now, shooter looter, looter shooter. Anyway, they is the kind of genre that they're calling it. And there's a few entries, and that kind of borders on like Destiny is kind of like that, and as well as Borderlands and some others or whatever. It's become much more prominent now than it was. Kind of a trendsetter back then, and we were kind of on the unfortunate edge. Though it was a game that I believe was really ahead of its time.
Yeah, I 100% agree that the game itself is was so far above anything that you could even categorically describe anything else at that time. I 100% agree with that sentiment. Um, so who owns the rights to it currently? Is it still Soft?
Soft was purchased by a company called T3 or something like that.
Okay.
And slightly after they had the rights, kind of like as the company was falling apart, another company came in and bought Soft and got the rights. And anyway, it was and then so they ended up having the rights to the game. I tried to buy it back, like I don't know, maybe like a year and a half later or so, maybe 2 years later, something like that, after Flagship Studios dissolved, and they wouldn't sell it to me. And then I got a strange call, like on December like 29th or 30th or something like that, like on a right before, and they're like, if you can wire us, a couple $1 million right now before the end
Oh,
of the year, we'll give you the
oh
IP. I'm like, what the hell?
no.
I can't even. There's no way I can even raise that kind of money or whatever in like basically 24 hours or whatever. You got to get out
Oh
of your mind.
man, not
Anyway,
when they
so
phrase it so sketchy like
yeah, it
that.
was so sketchy. Anyway, so the and I never inquired again, but that was the last time. But someday I dream, and then that was a little bit of the inspiration for It Lurks Below. It Lurks Below, in some ways, is like Hellgate London, and that is what I love, the kind of like shooting action, even though it It Lurks Below is 2D. I like the kind of like the shooting action and the RPG action RPG elements, and that was a bit of the inspiration was Hellgate for It Looks Below.
Yeah, I actually I had that thought that other day when I was playing that I was getting extremely Hellgate vibes in a 2D side scrolling setting, and it got me thinking about the Cornetto trilogy. If you're familiar with those movies, they're not necessarily a trilogy, but essentially it's Shaun of the Dead, Hot Fuzz, and then what is the last movie that they did here? Was The World's End.
And the world or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I was thinking in my head, you don't own the IP to Diablo, obviously, or Hellgate, but there could be, because of when Diablo 2 is kind of a medieval setting, that essentially all of these games could take place in the same Brevic universe.
Yes, in some ways that's absolutely true. That's for sure.
um So I don't want to take up too much of your time. I know you're gonna have dinner with your family soon. Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about tonight?
No, I'm just here to answer any kind of questions that you have for yourself. I'm having a good time, so there's not a big rush here. But if you had something else you wanted to talk about, I'd be happy to talk about it.
Definitely. Uh, when I was watching your interviews with Riker, the 2017 interview, not the Exile Con that you did recently, you guys kind of talked about item on bind and kind of the economy that takes place in these massive multiplayer games where the issue is that if the items are never removed from the economy, um, they will always lose value. How do you create a balancing act between what is a trading system that is worth it for me as a player that doesn't overstep the rest of the game?
Yeah, that's a difficult balance, and I think that they achieved it pretty well in something like World of Warcraft. I think is like one of the best examples where they have oftentimes some new content, and three-quarters of the items will be some sort of binding thing, bind on pickup or bind on equip, and that gets the items out of the economy. But then they have some items that you can just pick up and you can sell, right? And so that makes it so that there's new stuff that maybe a person that can't do that content has access to some of the new items. So it's kind of a balance since there are a lot of these different slots on your character. Oh, we're going to make the boots. Anybody can have the boots or the bracers, but if you want the chest piece and the legs, you have to defeat the bosses, and they're bind on pickup. And then the helmet is like a bind on equip, which means that you can get you can sell that, but it gets it out of the economy. And you get into this kind of situation where there's kind of this good balance. Yes, the boots and the bracers, the economy on those goes to hell. I mean, when it first comes out, they're going to be expensive, but over time they become cheaper and cheaper. But it doesn't ruin the entire economy for the set, and so in a lot of ways, it's a great balance when you're doing it that way, where there's a mix of things that are available for everybody, and there's still a vibrant trade market, but there's also it doesn't diminish the value of having the complete set as well. So I think that's probably one of the better examples in general. When you have an economy that's creating all these items, like I said, you have to get them out, and it's also it has like creating a great trade market is a difficult thing to do because it comes down to the harder it is to trade. The easier it is to trade, the more important it is to make some sort of like binding system. Now, there's a zillion ways to do a binding system, but having a binding system really helps. Like in limited number of trades, you could do it as a bind. You could do it on a bind on equip, bind on pickup. Having a certain amount of charges, bind on three trades. There's a zillion different ways that you can do it. Bind until you level the item up or something like that. Like, I mean, there's like almost anything you can imagine. But if it's really easy to trade items, then you need to have a way to kind of like regulate the items, or else just the entire market gets flooded. If it's very difficult to trade items, then it's a lot easier to have everything just not have binding. But you have to make sure that it's difficult to trade items and kind of a pain in the butt to trade items, because then it will limit the amount of trading that's actually going on.
Right, and more of actually playing the game.
Right.
So I saw that you're an avid Animal Crossing fan. How does
Indeed.
the game on the Switch compare to the previous editions?
Oh, I think it's great. I love it. I'm having a really good time. I've been playing it since it released. In fact, my whole family is. I have four daughters. All of them are playing, and my wife's playing, and I'm playing, and some of my friends are playing, and stuff like that. And so we've really enjoyed the game. I think it's the best version so far. I've loved it. I think it's been fantastic, and it was like almost the perfect game for kind of the situation we were in, where you could just spend hours and hours, in your town and fishing and chilling out and catching bugs and
Yeah.
finding fossils and all those kind of things that you do in an Animal Crossing game. When you had this kind of the pandemic, and making kind of a chill experience to go along with that was kind of perfect timing, in my opinion.
Yeah, my better half picked up the Animal Crossing, and she has enjoyed it immensely. I've never played an AC game, but one thing I noticed was it felt similar to Stardew Valley. I don't know if you've ever played that or not.
Yeah, I played a lot of Stardew Valley.
That game feels so good.
Yeah, yeah, it does. I love Stardew Valley. That was a fantastic game. In fact, that was one of the reasons that I wanted to, in ILB, put in crops and things like that, because I enjoyed it so much in Star in in Stardew Valley. I wanted to say Starbound, but it was Stardew Valley is what it was. Yeah.
I'm gonna have to check out that Starbound game.
Well, the Starbound, I think that for me, it was really great in early access. And then they took a kind of a different direction. They made a bunch of money in early access, a ton of money. And then, like, instead of working on the game, they went and they made their own publisher, which became this company called Chucklefish, that then they ended up publishing Stardew Valley. And so their very first early access game was a big hit. Then their first game that they did as a publisher was like a gigantic monster hit. I don't even like the people that were involved in making the game early, like, stopped being involved, and then they hired some other people who didn't quite have the same vision for the game, and it went in a different direction than it did in early access. And I wasn't super pleased with the way that it came out. I thought it was more fun in early access than it was than the final product, but I still did enjoy it, and it's worth checking out. It's not that
See,
expensive either.
well, it is what makes me back to the previous conversation. Does make me weary about the early access games because you're not buying a finished product. I mean,
Right.
uh, if they wanted to, they could just remove the whole game. You know, like
Yeah. Yeah.
obviously they wouldn't
Yeah.
because that would be silly. But it's the option is there. One
Oh, it's
experience
happened. It's happened. There's been games that have changed night and day between what they were in early access and what they ended up being in the final game, and
I
people have
know
been
with
upset.
Kickstarter it was really bad with a bunch of like campaigns where these are the promised features and then
Right.
when the game comes out it's a shell of what's promised. Right
And or never
now,
comes out, like
yeah.
Star Citizen.
I've been watching a lot of content on Ashes of Creation. Not sure if you've looked at it at all. It's kind of a new MMO, but they're also going with the early access um, start to the game. I myself do not play too many MMOs because I think in a world where um, there's so much information in playing these games that I often don't feel like I'm playing the game and spend more of my time reading somebody else's post on theory crafting.
Yeah.
Which is, I don't want to say one of my gripes about PoE, but I do wish that the game was more like start and go. Um, Arc is the game that I mostly have experience with being an early access, and that didn't go well at all. The wild card is kind of a scummy company. They actually ended up selling so many of their season passes that instead of making another DLC for the game, what they did was they released Atlas on the same engine.
Yeah. Right.
And it's like come on man, like I cannot believe that this is like actually happening right now and it's like It's
Well, when companies are desperate for money, they'll do desperate things, that's for sure.
yeah, yeah, definitely. Um, have you ever tried the game Don't Starve?
Yes, of course.
Okay, yeah. That's I enjoy the art style of that game more than I enjoy any other aspect of the game.
I liked it. I liked the game a lot. I played many hours of it, and I do enjoy the art style. The art style is really, really clever. I really like it. It's got such a unique style, and it's I think that's part of the charm of the game for sure. But I actually enjoyed the gameplay itself quite a bit as well, and I like the aspect of the challenge of trying not to starve. And build that up. But like all survival games, there's kind of like these plateaus that you reach where it becomes easier or whatever, and then I kind of tend to lose interest. So that's why I wanted to make survival part of ILB, but not really be the focus. Where there is kind of like there's more of the RPG aspect where survival's part of it, and that's part of what you're doing, but there's still this other aspect which is you're trying to kill bosses and level up and get to level 100 and et cetera, et cetera. That wanted that to be more of the goal than just survive. And now I feel like I've survived for several weeks and I'm kind of done.
Yeah, yeah. I've finally gotten to the point in It Lurks Below where I am not necessarily worried too much about the survival aspect of the game. It's just about the delve and buying the blueprints, or not buying the blueprints, but building the blueprints as they come up. Um, but what I wanted to mention is that we're kind of in a golden era of games, I think, where I remember during the PlayStation 2 era, especially, there was such an emphasis on graphics. And like looking back, all the graphics on those games like didn't necessarily look good. I remember watching the Final Fantasy X cinematics and thinking that this was it. Like this is as good as it could possibly be. Um, but now we're in kind of a state where people will play a game simply based on aesthetic.
Oh yeah,
It's it,
absolutely.
it's kind of interesting.
Well,
Um,
it's always been the case, though, in my opinion. As a longtime industry veteran, people have emphasized graphics and look, and it's just like so many other things in many other aspects of life. They say don't judge a book by a cover, but everybody does. So then it's the same kind of thing. I think with games is that it's don't judge a game by its graphics, but a lot of people do. And so, if your graphics look really great, that grabs somebody's interest, piques somebody's interest into at least looking into it further. And so, in a lot of ways, the call to having great graphics has been kind of a drum that's been beaten since the beginning of video games. I mean, that was one of the things that was like when Doom came out, right? That was just like it was such a giant leap forward in graphics compared to anything else that had ever existed before. That it set the world on fire because of the. I mean, it was fun gameplay too. Don't get me wrong, that was awesome. But the graphics itself was so immersive. We'd never kind of experienced something like that. It's similar to like the first time I saw. I'm very old, so I saw Star Wars in a theater as a kid. So the first time I saw Star Wars, I was just like that opening scene, like it blew me away. I'd never seen anything like that in my life. It was like so far beyond anything that I'd ever seen in my life before, and it was so realistic that I can remember to this day. Like it was night and day different than any other movie I'd ever seen.
what's kind of interesting though is if you go back and watch the older Star Wars movies, they've done digital retouches and everything like that. Um, but those movies are made because obviously there's no computers capable of CGI at that point in time. All of those effects are practical effects, and
Yeah, yeah,
there's something to be said about watching a movie like that, I think.
absolutely.
And then what did you think of the sequel trilogy, if you don't mind me derailing a little bit?
Yeah, no, no, it's fine. Yeah, I think that the last three movies I enjoyed pretty well, but I think that overall it was weird the way that they kind of came together. It seems bizarre to me that Disney would put somebody in charge of a trilogy and not have a plan. Like the three movies weren't mapped out into a coherent story, and then they hired different directors to do each film,
Yeah.
and then like the first director directs a movie, J.J. Abrams directs a movie that comes, and then Rain Johnson gets hired to do the second movie, and like says, no, we're not going to do any of that stuff or worry about the first movie. We're going to kind of contradict it on any level. And then they hired a different director for the third movie, who then left, and then they went back to J.J. Abrams, and then he's like, no, 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 we're going to throw all that stuff that you did in the second movie out as well. And we're going to do something completely different or whatever, because you didn't like the things that I did. It was almost like this director infighting. It was bizarre. So in that way, I didn't enjoy it. I liked the characters in some way. I liked Ray. I liked Kylo Ren. I thought that they had a lot of they had a lot of potential. And But I didn't think that any of the characters really lived up to be as cool as they could have been. And I think that the story ultimately kind of fell flat because of the fact that there wasn't kind of an overall coherent story or direction from the beginning. Everybody got to write their own movie and their own story that just kind of continued from the previous one without any kind of overarching path to guide them, and it kind of shows.
It definitely does feel like a pissing contest between Rian Johnson and J.J. Abrams. And that was kind of upsetting to watch. I do like the way that it finished. I think it's kind of a bummer that they actually ended up going with Palpatine coming back, which I'm conflicted about because on one hand, um, the whole story of Palpatine basically starts with him trying to use the life essence transfer force ability, right? So I don't
Right.
necessarily have any problem with that, but I have a problem where I believe deaths should be permanent, at least in some regard. I know there's the force ghosts, but that was my major gripe with the movie.
Yeah, and so overall, there were things about it that I liked and things I didn't, but it didn't ruin Star Wars for me. I still love Star Wars, and I am excited about more Star Wars stuff. And I really enjoyed the Mandalorian series and things like that. So, I'm still a big Star Wars fan, and I'm still gonna enjoy more Star Wars stuff in the future. So, even though if the original trilogy, if the whatever the prequels couldn't couldn't ruin the series for me, then I don't think anything can. Because
See,
because the Phantom Menace was a terrible movie.
oh, you're breaking my heart, David. That's my favorite, man. And I don't know if it's nostalgia. I remember when the Phantom Menace came out, I had a glow in the dark Darth Maul shirt. I was maybe 6 or 7 years old, and my aunt had taken me and all of our cousins out of school to go see it.
Awesome.
And it was just
That
this
sounds really
like
cool.
momentous occasion. And
Yeah, and I
I
think that your opinion would change definitely between being 6 and see it the first time and being whatever, whatever I was in my mid-30s or something, whatever it was. And that's uh, I think for me, the magic of Star Wars was when I was in the kid, in 1977 when it came out. That was kind of the golden age for me, versus I had grown up and matured, and like I was a different person, saw Star Wars in a different way. And so the fact that it played more as almost like a kid's movie would make it kind of in your wheelhouse as a kid at the time, but it was not in my wheelhouse as an adult. And so I think that kind of affects my opinion of it. So again, I don't really like the movie very much, but I know that there are a bunch of people that do, and it didn't ruin Star Wars for me. I still love Star Wars, so I guess that there's really no ruining it for me at this point.
Those games on the Super Nintendo were super tough too. I
Yeah, they were.
remember. um, and you came into contact with the Blizzard guys uh, by pure happenstance of you guys both creating essentially the same Justice League game, right?
Yeah, that's right. We had been making a game, Justice League Task Force, which was a fighting game with, Superman and Batman, Wonder Woman, Flash, Aquaman, etc. It was kind of like a Street Fighter clone, uh, similar to like I don't know. They had like a Injustice game or something like that a few years ago. There was maybe a fighting game with the DC
Uh-huh.
heroes. Anyway, it was the same kind of thing. We were making the game on the Sega Genesis, and Silicon and Synapse. That's what they were called at the time. Then they changed their name to Blizzard eventually, but they were a just a developer. They weren't they weren't owned at that time. They were independent game developer, and they were making the Super Nintendo version, and that's we had met at this was before E3 existed, and we were at a Consumer Electronics Show, was where we used to show off. Yeah, the Consumer Electronics Show, which is like literally there was like our video game section was right next to like the car stereos and the refrigerators. It was really that was what video game shows were way back then. So that's we had met at a Consumer Electronics Show.
I couldn't even imagine that honestly, like, I don't believe that at that time in what, 93, 94, that you guys would have even ever been able to conceptualize what gaming has become today.
Oh yeah, not even. I mean, when I was a kid, I was an outcast in high school, and because I was super nerdy and I was into computers, and I don't know, it's the equivalent of I don't know, maybe today somebody being really into like ham radios or something. It's like it was like a kind of a weird niche like group or whatever. There's some people that really love it or whatever, and that's their thing. It's I don't know, being part of the chess club or whatever. It's just like a small group of kind of nerdy people, and I was in this small group of nerdy people that really liked computers. I never imagined that computer gaming would become as popular and mainstream as it did, but it certainly has. It is gigantic now, and I don't really see it slowing down. There's going to be people playing games for a long time.
Do you think that there is a developer bubble?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a bubble. I mean, we're seeing it anyway, but it's not just developer bubble, but also just a game bubble. The fact of the matter is that right now there are uh, approximately across all platforms, if you bring in mobile, console, PC, etc., that across all these platforms, there's about 1,000 games released a week.
Jesus
And
Christ.
so, because of that, like the content, like people just can't even, most people can't even, I used to know every game that was coming out. Like I could list off every game. I played a great majority of them. Like now, I don't even know 75% of the games that are out there because there's too many, there's too much product. And so in that way, it's sort of like, I don't know, it's like writing or anything else. Like almost anybody can write a book, whether or not they're really good at it or whatever is irrelevant. The technology exists for them, for anybody to write a book and publish it on the internet. And because of that, there's just a ton of books out there. And so it's the same kind of thing. If you can work a game engine, which there's more and more games engines out there that you don't really even need programming to do or whatever, and you can buy assets off the internet and things like that. You can put a game together. Almost anybody can do it at this point, and because of that, and the fact that we have digital distribution and things like that, there's just tons and tons of product now, and in some ways that's a good thing. It's a more competitive. We get better quality software. The best games, oftentimes get highlighted, but also you get great games that get lost in the woods and nobody ever hears about them. And it's a shame because they could have been great products, things that could have been ahead of their time, but because there's so much competition, you have like 1 second to make noise before everybody's moved on to something else.
Yeah, especially when you consider the concept of games as a service, because some games could end up being the best game, but perhaps there's a universe where the support isn't there early on, and they never get to a point where they get to patch the game enough to where the game becomes the perfect incarnation of itself.
Right. Yeah.
I also think we probably live in a world for maybe the first time where I imagine if you asked kids from the ages 12 to 15, that maybe for the first time in American history, more of them would say that they want to play video games professionally in some regard
Right.
versus I want to be in the NFL.
Right. Yes. Yeah. That's probably true.
And if, from my standpoint, I think the odds are relatively the same, right?
Yeah. Probably. To become a professional gamer, you have to be very good at a particular game. That's for sure.
Yeah, good or entertaining. Uh,
Yeah.
there's a
Exactly.
lot to it. There's some people who are taking acting classes and stuff like that to be more engaging with the chat and things like that. And it's
Absolutely.
it's kind of created this secondary market almost, uh, where you can hire a Fortnite coach for your kid.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
it's just mind blowing to me. I
Yeah.
never
Times have
thought
changed.
I never thought doing my tryst run in the morning at 6 o'clock, trying to get a couple levels in before I had to go catch the bus in the morning for school that day. Never in a million years would I think that somebody who makes all of their money playing video games is now buying an island.
Yeah.
Mind blowing.
Indeed.
What do you think? So I noticed when I initially started playing at Lurks Below, I wanted to wait for multiplayer to come out because I thought that it was going to be something that had was going to come out sooner than it did. Um, So I bought the game when it was in early access, pretty much immediately as you released it for early access. I was like, "Oh, David's working on something. I'm gonna buy that." Sight
Thank you.
sight unseen.
Thanks.
Um, so when I initially played it, I don't believe that there were races in the game. Um, when did that get put in?
Races, well, just choosing between ogre and human got put in the Badlands update in like last October, like less than a year it's been in.
Okay,
There was, in fact, there weren't even character classes in I mean, there was only one race you could only play human. There was only one there wasn't even a character class. There was only like one character you could play. So I added classes probably maybe a few months in, and then added I added melee about maybe 5 or 6 months in to early access, something like that. So there were quite a few changes along the way. The game ended up being very different than it was at the very beginning.
yeah, I remember being extremely you were talking about this on stream the other day. The survival aspect of the game was so hard on release that I remember picking all the resources off the map, and then it was just like, this is it. This is my life now, just dying of
Yep.
hunger. um so do you plan on adding more races to the game?
Yes, yeah, there are
Okay.
more races coming.
Awesome. Any ideas of what you're adding? Are you gonna add elves? What's the plan?
Yeah, elves has been announced. We've talked about adding elves quite a bit. There's an elf area and stuff, but the other races are still unannounced. But we have plans.
Okay. Does It Lurks Below have mod support?
No, it does not. Making mod support is very. You have to kind of design it in from the beginning, and it
Uh-huh.
can be pretty difficult. But uh, in all honesty, I wish I had taken the time to put in more mod support. Just because I think that it can help breathe life into a game and keep it going quite a bit. From the community that really enjoys doing that kind of thing can really add a lot of value to the product. So in the future, I would love to add that kind of thing, but currently there's nothing.
I imagine it's a lot to go back and retroactively add to the game as well.
Yeah, a lot of ways you got to make kind of like your tools and your pipeline kind of support it from the beginning, so that you're doing all sorts of kind of sanity checking on the data and all of those kind of things to make sure that it works properly.
Do you look into any of the fan projects for things like Diablo 2?
Yeah, absolutely. We've played some of the different mods and stuff on the stream before. We play Path of Diablo and there are 4 or 5 that we've played or whatever on not only Diablo but Diablo 2 and so we've played quite a few of those things. We've really enjoyed playing that kind of thing and seeing what people do with it's amazing the amount of changes that they can make in these products and how much time and energy and effort they put into these things.
Yeah, definitely. And what I find really interesting about Diablo 2 modding specifically, because I'm somewhat in the community, is most of the modding can basically be done through Excel, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, some of them can. It depends on what you are doing or whatever. But yeah, there are tools out there that allow you to do a lot of Excel things. If you're not going to change graphics, obviously with Excel, but yeah,
Uh,
the kind of the baseline way that we got data into the game for Diablo 2 was Excel, and it's actually what I'm doing for It Lurks Below as well.
oh, really?
Yes.
So, it would be possible then basically to like rip drop tables from the game,
Yeah, I
hypothetically.
mean, it would be, except for I've got the entire game compressed into my own format or whatever that would make it kind of difficult. Again, if I were to kind of give it mod support and do some uncompressed data that people could change, then that might be, that would be the way that I would do it. I would do it through Excel.
It's kind of a double-edged sword though, because while you are allowing the community to take this game and kind of, as you said, breathe more life into it, you're also putting the game in a state where it's not necessarily a problem in single player, but surely in multiplayer, you're potentially exposing the game to more exploits, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I know that's with Diablo 2, that's the big problem and why they chose to go with always online in Diablo 3,
Yeah, exactly.
which I don't necessarily have a problem with the always online. I wish that there was an option to play the game offline. I don't know, maybe if you're on like a long flight or something like that. But I can understand the reasoning for it, and Path of Exile is the same way. They just don't want stuff to get out there like that. What was it like working with the team in China for PoE?
Oh, it was great. I worked with Tencent and Grinding Gear Games to bring the game to China, and consulted with Grinding Gear Games on things that my experience of bringing games to China and what it was like, because the market there is very different than other places, and what the gamers there like and expect and stuff like that. This is the first time that they had been taking a game to China, so I was helping them not only with feedback and like what sells, what doesn't sell, how to market it, things like that, and helping them out with that. It was great. I mean, Chris and I have known each other quite a long time. Uh, they're obviously they were huge Diablo 2 fans. That's the reason they made Path of Exile. And so we met each other years before at for in fact, I'm not even sure that Path of Exile was even out, or maybe it was in like alpha or something like that. Is when we first met at a game developers conference, and we had dinner together one time, and then hit off a friendship where we've hung out with them quite a few times. And I was just there in New Zealand with them, in November, hanging out. And I've been to New Zealand a few times now to hang out with them and do events with them. I did a GDC there. I was at the Exile Con in November and things like that. So anyway, I really like the entire team at Grinding Gear Games. I think they're really great people, and they are very know that what they're doing. They're excellent developers, and I think they did a great job bringing the game to China. Has had quite a bit of success there. In fact, so much success that Tencent bought them. So that was that was good.
Yeah. And I started playing Path of Exile, I believe, in the beta. I'm not a hardcore PoE fan. I will play it. But I played in the beta. At that point in time, there was only 3 acts. Um, and like you said, you could really tell that they're fans of Diablo 2. And I've referred to anybody who's unaware of what Path of Exile is. I refer to it as the spiritual successor of Diablo 2, truly.
Yeah, absolutely. We feel like that is the case as well. It's definitely in spirit, very much like Diablo 2 successor for sure.
That's what does that feel like to I mean, because PoE is one of the biggest games on Steam, and to know that their inspiration is something that you did, you know, 10, 12 years prior. What's that feel like?
Uh, you know, it's kind of a weird position to be in, but it's inspiring that people love the games so much that they want to do their own kind of things or draw inspiration from something that you've worked on or whatever. It's wonderful. It's obviously it's a compliment, but it also feels strange because it's like, well, I in a lot of ways I would like to work on that, or I would like to be involved because I love, yes, it's drew inspiration, but I think that you're onto something here, and maybe I could help or whatever. Anyway, kind of the designer in me takes over in some ways, even though it's not really even my product or whatever. It's very flattering to get to be an inspiration in any way, shape, or form. So
Have
uh,
they
great.
have they offered you a consulting role?
Yeah, no, that was what I was doing, consulting with them or whatever, while I was doing the stuff for China. It was mainly focused on the Chinese market stuff or whatever, but I also gave feedback on the game and gave them ideas and talked about different things. And they asked me a bunch of questions, my opinion on what direction they should go with this, that, or the other thing. We discussed a bunch of stuff. Uh, Anyway, so they have been giving me feedback quite a bit. I mean, I gave them quite a bit of feedback or whatever, though they are perfectly capable, amazing designers in their own right. And it's not, I don't know if they even used any of my suggestions. I did consult with them for a couple years.
Hard not to, I imagine. Well, David, I just want to say again, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me today. We kind of went over the allotted time that we were had agreed upon earlier, so I feel like I've stolen something from you.
Not
Um,
at all.
I'll let you get to your family. I really appreciate what you've done for the community, what you've done for me personally. And I really am enjoying the game so far. I look forward to the future updates. Again, guys, the game is It Lurks Below. You can purchase it on Steam and Windows 10, and it is currently on Game Pass.
Correct.
All right, David, thank you so much for your time. I will
Thank you.
be watching your guys' stream tomorrow.
Cool. Great. Thank you.
Bye.
Have a good one.